So, uh, just so Molly and Christine know, I just met Dane this evening. Um, I think this is a really cool topic, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But it's not that easy to find real fireplace and chimney experts anywhere in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And as far as I know, Dane and his company are that variety of experts. So I'm very interested to hear what he has to say tonight. So I will start things off not in the way that I normally would. I would ask Dane some question about being an author and how cool is it to sell books on Amazon. I'm going to skip right over that. Um, Dane, I'm working in New England, so darn near every house I work on, uh, other than the ultra moderns, have a fireplace, and most of them do
Mm-hmm.
also.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not at all uncommon. I mean, like 99 out of 100 ones that I'm uninvolved with during design are smoky or have some
Mm-hmm.
problem. And
Mm-hmm.
this really drives homeowners crazy.
Yep.
So I'll let you start with the easy stuff there.
Well, that's why I exist, is because it's relatively interesting how smoke goes up the chimney, and that's 9/10 of my job here, right? We design fireplace construction for architects, and then we also manufacture materials and send to job sites, and we also install. But you know, if the smoke doesn't go up the flue, then I haven't done my job, and all the pretty stuff doesn't matter anymore. And we kind of got our start by doing some moonlighting for fireplaces and nice homes that didn't work. And when you walk into a house with a fireplace that doesn't work, you can tell right away it smells like smoke, or there's black stains going up, and that's kind of our job, is to make the fireplace breathe, make the fireplace work with the home, and make the externalities from the flame, whether it be gas or wood, go up the chimney. Um, you know, to do this, we have to work on high-end homes that have large budgets to let us help them be thorough. Clients that hire consultants, like the elevator guy. I'm just usually one of 20 on these big jobs.
Yep.
And we work with the fireplace and the mechanical and the plumbing to merge it into the home, because fireplace construction these days isn't like fireplace construction 100 years ago. um, all these homes are built so tight, and there's no air, and the air has to come from somewhere. And that's the majority of the problems of fireplaces that don't work in our country these days, is a lack of makeup air.
So you pretty much just, you know, nailed it there. And I'm going to just go straight to a technical question.
Sure.
So there's combustion air, meaning, you need oxygen to combine with, you know, cellulose in the wood, uh, for it to burn.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's makeup or draft air. I don't know if those are,
Mm-hmm.
do you call that the same thing, or if that's two different things for you. But like, do you have a sense of what the percentage split is between those two?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, when we're designing fireplaces that are in the center of the home, where, these homes are big and plan, and the outside is a long way away from the fireplace, it becomes difficult to bring outside air into a firebox. And what we found is that combustion air delivered into a fireplace in that method is about 15% of the air needs of a fireplace. Now, in the building codes, they ask for a combustion air duct that's the equivalent of like a 4x9, like the size of a brick. You've
Yeah.
seen little ducts.
I don't
in
even
fire.
think they call it. Do they even call it combustion air? I think they just call it fresh air.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
fresh
call it
air
fresh air
duct.
intake. That's all
Yeah,
we call it.
fresh air. Why does
Yep,
that even have to come from out? Is there some definition of fresh air that it has to come from outside? Why can't I freshen it up inside?
you can. And there's another part of the code that lets you do it mechanically. And it doesn't talk about makeup air in the code for.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
We try to teach everybody is. Did you lose me?
We
Just
lost you for a
for
sec.
half a
Makeup
sentence.
air.
What we try to teach everybody is to think of the fireplace, as a living, breathing thing. Think of it as like a large kitchen hood. And mechanical engineers understand that logic. And when you ask a mechanical engineer to specify some makeup air for the fireplace, make it like the big, like a big kitchen hood, they get that. I mean, it makes sense to me that their, natural draft moves really slow. It's, I don't know, I'm grasping here, but I think HVAC, grill ducts, coming out there, moving at about 15 feet per second or something like that. The natural drafting is, a fraction of that, right? So we're moving it slow, but you're bringing air, out from the room into the firebox, and it's got to come from somewhere. And when you kind of equate, okay, you have a 12-inch duct on this fireplace for exhaust, you need like a 12-inch duct coming in, and when you start talking to mechanical engineers, they get that storyline.
Yeah.
And then you start figuring out how to introduce that air into the house, for the fireplace to exhaust.
It's funny that you mentioned range hoods, in that our kitchens now look a lot different than they used to look. And especially on a lot of these big homes, like not a fancy apartment, but these giant homes have like enormous, it's like basically a commercial kitchen.
Yeah, right.
That people have residentially. And my range hood in my kitchen has a enormous fan on it, more appropriate for commercial applications. And in a lot of cases, I think we don't really realize that we have to account for that somehow. Like that air does have to come from somewhere. So my house is an old house. It's a leaky house. It's no big deal. I'm not really worried. But in a newer house, that it matters where that air comes from, and you end up having to provide makeup air to kitchens too. Exactly. People really they're not used to that, and architecturally, that's a hard thing to incorporate when you haven't had to do that before. So where do you put that in a place? And actually, then this is I think a good question for you is, what do you find are the best options for where to locate that? Like, obviously you have to have some sort of connection to air somewhere, and you're delivering it to your fireplace. What's the best, like that has an aesthetic implication. What's the best way around that? What are some popular ways of addressing that?
So to answer both questions, Foster's as well, architects in general don't like to see the grills inside the fireboxes, right? And we can actually, if we can prove that all of the air for the fireplace that it needs can come from the room, then we can do away with the combustion air duct in the firebox. And just a side tangent, combustion air, if you're, in the Northeast, and it's the middle of winter and you're introducing cold outside air directly into the fireplaces, they rely on heat. And sometimes they can work against you. The air can come in and it can dilute the temperatures and, diminish the draft. So there's a lot of circumstances where combustion air isn't really good for that particular fireplace, or it's not working well. And so it has to be treated independently. It can be a supplement for houses that have a lot of fireplaces and they can't afford to buy 5,000 CFM, to spread around the house. So to answer your question, it depends on if we get into a project early and we get to work with the mechanical engineer and we get to specify the amount of makeup air that fireplaces will need through the house, then oftentimes that number comes from the HVAC equipment that gets specified, and they'll like in my house, my cheap house, the HVAC system recycles 100% of the air. And, on these higher end homes, they can afford to bring outside air in and condition the air. And then
Oh no.
and not recycle 100% of it and leave some net air for the fireplaces. Did you lose me again?
Just for half a sentence.
I don't know. Technology.
Yeah, yeah. Our plan is
Um,
we just keep talking if you disappear.
Just raise your hand. So, if we get into a project early, we can work with the mechanical system and, get in and get our makeup air, from the house, basically. If we come in late and the fireplace doesn't have any makeup air, just the kitchen hood, there are off-the-shelf, independent, standalone makeup air units.
So okay, when I hear that, I kind of worry because that suggests to me that we're overventilating the house because the fire isn't, presumably the fireplace is not on that much. So if the mechanical system is bringing in enough air to satisfy like a roaring fire, what do we do for the 99% of the time where there isn't a fire? Are we overventilating, or is there a
That's a
way of
good question.
controlling that?
You don't have to operate, the makeup air the whole time. Our fireplaces have wall switches usually, even the wood burners, and the wall switch will, tell the motorized damper on the flue to open, and it'll send a signal to the HVAC, equipment to boost zone 7, or what have you, for that fireplace. A lot of these homes have, 5, 8 fireplaces in them.
Yeah.
So it becomes, a logistical, challenge to, provide air for the fireplaces in 8 different parts of the home. But it,
Well,
it's very
Dane,
possible.
when it gets complicated, so I'm understanding that if you're in early on a project and
Mm-hmm.
there's a mechanical engineer involved,
Mm-hmm.
you can get your combustion and draft air requirements designed into the mechanical system.
Usually.
But if you're late and you miss that boat, you might have to monkey around with some equipment, suggested equipment, and install it somehow, and hopefully nobody minds. So my question is, on these, when it gets big and complicated, 5, 8 fireplaces, multiple levels, and they even decide to put one in the basement and all this ridiculousness.
Right.
Do you ever have to resort to measuring pressure?
So the ideal fireplace will have a plane of air that travels about a half a foot a second across the opening of the fireplace. And, that's what keeps the poofs of the combustion, as it poofs out into the room, it'll dive back into the top of the opening, and you can kind of see that if you look from the side. And so having that air is pretty critical for us. But it plays in, to the mechanical system, and you have to have a slight positive pressure in the room. And so it's I'm no mechanical engineer, but it's a balance, to be drafty, and uncomfortable, rather than, the opposite where the room is starving.
Because I get called in a couple times a year. Some architect calls me and says, "Hey, we just finished up a house, and the contractor was a bit of a pain in the neck, and his mason was a real idiot, and now all the fire boxes are smoky, and I checked my sizes 65 times, and can you help me out figure what's wrong?" And I'm like, I'm like, "Look, I can do this on the phone with you, and it's free. If you make me go to the house, I'm going to have to charge you."
Right. Exactly.
Long story short, it's pretty much just what you described. I recommend a fan that's going to pressurize the room, but sizing that, it's my understanding, and you do this a lot more than me, there's no ASHRAE standard existing. There's no, like, you can't go pull 10 books off the shelf and take the average of them. You kind of sit there and scratch your head and say, I think about this number is going to work. Am I getting that about right?
Yeah, I think there is an ASHRAE call out for makeup air, but
There
they
is, but
they approach it differently than us because they're all about the BTUs of what's being burned in the fireplace.
yeah,
And so,
and no commentary on how many people are, using the bathroom fans or the kitchen
right,
fan or 65
right.
other things that are going on in the house, or
Yeah,
whether it's in the attic or the basement or.
that's what separates us from the Flue installers, around the country that, all they do is just plop down some Flues and move on to the next home.
Yeah,
Someone's going to look to us when the smoke's coming back, in their face. We're on the
yeah.
near the top of the list of phone calls, yeah, and it depends on size of the opening, the shape of the opening, the depth of the firebox, what you're burning. We have clients that have 6-foot tall fireplace openings, and they want the flame tips to go up past the opening. Like silly requests, right?
Whoa, whoa,
And
whoa. That sounds awesome.
it's totally awesome, but that's more air than the little 50,000 BTU an hour burner for a smaller fireplace. So all those variables play in, and the wood burners are the ones that drive you nuts because you can control a gas system pretty much, but controlling the size of a wood burning fuel load, and you really have to get to know the clients and the client's needs, but you don't, because I'm 7 layers deep in the hierarchy level. So I have to ask 7 different people to get the answer I need on, okay, is this guy, does he want to burn 4 fuel loads a night, and just rock this thing? Or is this, a beach home that they're going to be there 2 weeks out of 1 year, in the summertime, and they're never going to get used, and so you kind of have to plan for like all these different scenarios. And that's
Yeah.
where the, the history comes in and the experience, and you just you kind of guess sometimes. Sometimes fireplaces will work at 25 CFM 25 CFM per square foot of opening. We've seen them work at a low amount of air, and then on the flip side, we found fireplaces that need 75 CFM per square foot of opening. And
Now, but those CFMs you're talking about, they don't need to be delivered right to into the firebox, right? They could be
correct.
delivered, on the other, as long as you're pressurizing the room.
Correct. That was Christine's
So,
comment about the architectural approach to delivering that air.
yeah, so if it's a small room that has doors that it gets shut in, arguably it could be like opposite side of the room. But if it's
Totally.
arguably a huge room with a tall ceiling, you might have to deliver it close to the firebox. So am I getting that about right?
Yeah, we've seen homes with super tall ceilings, and you look up and they have like an exhaust fan at the top of their window system.
Sweet.
I'm like, that's a chimney effect right there. That's gonna steal all my air, from the room. Or the big kitchen hood, around the corner that shares the same airspace.
Oh yeah.
That we have to electrically connect to so that one can work at a time and not both.
Oh
so
yeah.
so okay, let's 6-foot tall opening,
Yeah.
giant fireplace, middle of the
Yeah.
house. Aesthetics are not a concern. We just don't want to burn things down and breathe combustion for the products of combustion. What's the optimal place to deliver the makeup air if we're not concerned about aesthetics? Or is there a best?
Well, as you graduate further and further away from the fireplace, it's more difficult, for the air to find the fireplace. It has to travel, more of a distance. We had some fireplaces up in Vermont 2 years ago. They were wood burners, and the architect delivered us the makeup air, around the side of the fireplace, and it turned out, it worked really well. We've had fireplaces in remote, islands that didn't have any electricity, so we had to find a way to bring air into the house through small grills, underneath a raised, hearth, area with a little manual damper. So when they want to use the fireplace, they open it up and let the air
Oh.
come in. It's cold air, but it's right there at the fireplace. So it won't have to, the cold air doesn't have to travel across the room.
I've actually seen, I think what you're describing, and it looks kind of nice in that there's a pretty looking, it's almost like you think it's there to collect ashes, but it's a little bit toward the interior, not quite in the firebox. And it's a little kind of grate there that is delivering, it's not for ashes, it's delivering the makeup air. Is that effective?
Yeah.
That works?
It is. Yeah, it does. In fact, we'll design a fireplace with a slot in the hearth. If a fireplace has to have a glass door on it, and the slot that's behind the glass door, the fireplace will start to draw, and it'll draw air wherever the easiest source is. And there's some, we hope it's through that slot, and so it's a passive, pulling of the air, and the air will come across the inside of the glass and keep the glass cool and clean. And that's a way to use glass doors on fireplaces and not let them soot up. It's also kind of a glass curtain, if you will, when we really have to get creative and we're working in the 66th floor of some skyscraper in New York, and the building gives you no air for the fireplace, right? And so we're pulling air from every direction. We're creating our own makeup air with the slot and the glass curtain. It's kind of like when you walk into the Vegas casino and you get your hair blown back by the curtain of air. That's I often kind of think of it like that. You're introducing air, you're pretending it's makeup air, but it's really combustion air, but it's doing the same thing. It's feeding the fireplace and keeping the smoke in the firebox.
Now, what's really harder, figuring out all this makeup air or getting the chimney flue out of the house?
So architect firms like Molly's, they like to put the chimneys on the other side of the house from the fireplace. They don't put the chimneys, above the fireboxes anymore. They put them where
that's where they put the structural steel.
That's right. So we have to go.
Guilty as charged.
Exactly. But that's why we exist, is to route circuitous flues through buildings and make them work with fans that don't sound like jet engines, that work with the home and the controls.
So, can you, like, this is something I just legitimately don't know. If you introduce a mechanical fan into your flue, your exhaust flue, can you then turn it almost any way you want? In other words, without a fan, you can only go like 30 degrees or whatever, and
Depends on who you ask. The building code says no. The manufacturer's instructions for the UL listed flues say no, but we do it, because it can be done. So in this Vermont project, this house was on Lake Champlain, and it had 9 fireplaces in it, 7 of which had flues that went straight up. The architect firm hired us because 2 of them the flues had to go up in the attic and then across the attic and around the structural steel to find the chimneys that they wanted to bend through. And they wanted them wood burning. So it wasn't just a simple gas system. When it's gas, it's much easier because you can control the combustion. If there's a problem, you can shut it off, and it's not going to be a problem. Even if it's not venting, you'll get some smoke back into the room, but it's still not going to be a huge issue. When it's a wood burner and the fan goes out and your flue is horizontal and it's probably not going to continue to draft for long, but your fire is going to keep burning for an hour. That's the problem. And
when you say problem, you mean like death, right? Like carbon monoxide in the house, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
House, right?
Just make sure I understood for a full year.
Right. And there's some building inspectors that don't appreciate this approach, right? And so it's our job a lot of times to convince the building inspectors that yes, we can do this. It can be safe. There are options. There are alternative safety measures that we can include in our designs, you know, to double and triple check and make sure, you know, we're not going to smoke everybody out of the house.
Okay,
And,
and ultimately that's you have to get a like dispensation from the building department to
that's usually
do it.
what we suggest, right? We early
Yeah.
in the design process, we'll sketch out a solution. We'll say, you know, please go get us a green light from whoever has the relationship, you know, with the local inspector that's
Yeah.
going
Okay.
to approve or disapprove this. And,
Got it.
you know, generally, you know, we've never really found a hurdle that we can't do, we can't get over. It's just a matter of some people need more convincing, need more safety, you know, additions.
Yep.
Long time ago in a past life, we had a wood burner in a some Ritz-Carlton hotel that had a horizontal flue that, you know, went underneath a swimming pool and then up.
Cool.
And the local inspector made us, you know, wrap the flues in you know, a 2-hour enclosure, you know, with a sprinkler system, and then a fireproof closet, you know, next to the fireplace that had a shovel and a
Wow.
wheelbarrow, you know, and, you know, if there was ever a problem, and the last, you know, course of safety was to physically remove the burning coals, they could shovel them into the wheelbarrow, push the wheelbarrow into the closet and close it.
Wow.
So there's been lots of circumstances like that where we had to go a little above and beyond what's normal, you know, to satisfy an inspector, but not
Now,
usually.
I was involved with a project not too long ago, and I'm just wondering if you've ever been outsmarted by the idiots in the same fashion I have been at various times in my career, where when
I'm
nobody
gonna
was
say
looking,
yes. You know this, right? Yeah.
when, when nobody was looking, uh, they decided to meet the code for spark arrestor at the top of the flue with a fairly tight meshed screen just
Mm.
laid flat
Oh yes.
instead
Yes.
of, you know,
Yep.
up and around. Well, after about the third time that the homeowner used the fireplace, it, you know, it
It's
looked
clogged
more
up.
like a, you know,
Mhm.
COVID mask than a open mesh screen. And suddenly the fireplace wasn't working.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, it was the mason's fault and the general contractor's fault and Benjamin
Hmm.
Franklin's fault, and, you
Yep.
know, on and on and on.
Everybody's pointing.
Yeah. How often do you get foiled by, you know, some other trade?
Well, when we're involved in a project, we try to control all the variables that really make a difference. And chimney tops, you know, can really um, choke a chimney and a nice fireplace. And you know, you can do everything right, you know, and if you find that someone, you know, meshes over, you know, horizontally over the top of a flue, you know, then and that can it can be remedied, you know, at least, you know. Um, there's a rule that we use. It's the screening for the fireplace flue has to be 4 times the square area of the flue itself.
Right.
And so that means you either have to screen going up, you know, or if architects don't want to see, they want the look of an open top chimney,
Yeah.
you know, we screen going down, you know, like a
Screen going down. Let me make
conical
sure.
fashion.
So let me make sure I understand this.
Mm-hmm.
So if I look up from the ground, it looks like a regular chimney with a flue
Mm-hmm.
sticking out of the top. That's all I see.
Mm-hmm.
But if I
Mm-hmm.
climbed up there,
Mm-hmm.
I see that there's actually a hole
Like
and
a
the
cone
bricks,
screen that goes down into the flue. Mm-hmm.
but it has like a 6 inches of clay on top of it to just look like a,
Yeah, yeah, or a clay pot, you know,
right.
something without a cover,
But
or the chimney.
how do you figure out how much distance you need between your screen and whatever the hell the wall is that they're looking at from the ground?
This screen is on the inside of the flue, right? You have to actually look down into the flue to see the screen.
Oh,
But
Got
they
it.
make
That's a
really good bird nests.
much better idea than I was suggesting. I'm gonna I'm gonna steal it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
one way. We work for this one architect that loves open top chimneys, and um, they uh, they avoid seeing the mechanical part
right.
on a chimney to really clean look. And so we open up the chimney and then we screen going down in, but then the flues digest all the weather and water. So we have to drain the water out of the flues before
Yeah, I was just
the
gonna ask about draining the water out.
uh-huh.
Yeah, how do you do that?
Well, in masonry chimneys is, the masonry absorbs the
Yeah,
water.
yeah, usually, yeah.
In these homes where we have circuitous flues and we have to use metal flues to get there, um, then they don't absorb anything. There's uh, different flue manufacturers that make inline drains, like
Okay.
Hmm.
a small gutter,
Yep.
and they drain to sewer. And for the real open top ones, we'll design a sump version of a drain. So the flue's coming down, and we catch it in a sump, but there's a Y section that comes off of one side. So the smoke's traveling, up through the Y, and the sump is the one that's
Yeah, okay.
collecting.
Interesting. I worked on a house that had an open top like that, and this was in a forensic capacity, and it was the kind of next to their hearth on the interior. It was leaking, and they
Mhm.
weren't sure. Could have been. There's all kinds of stuff there's all kinds of stuff it could have been.
Yeah.
Turns out that it was actually water getting into the house from just the
Yeah.
openness of the chimney. Now, I
Mhm.
don't know what it is. I'm looking after the fact, so I don't know how they built that chimney, but it was a traditional brick chimney, and it was making their wallpaper go all wonky and
Yeah.
kinds of other stuff. And so the
Mhm.
most reasonable solution at that stage is to just cover, put
Yep.
a little hat
Yep. Right.
to stop most of the water
Mhm.
from getting in. But and that was fine. That was not unpalatable to them from an
Yeah.
aesthetic perspective. It was also it was central in the house, so it was so far you really don't. Sure, you could see it because it's the chimney from the ground, but
Yeah.
it's like it's really not.
Yeah. That obvious.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's horrifying,
And
Molly, but it wasn't.
Molly just threw something at her screen there.
Violated the
Um,
sight line. Yeah.
no, I actually have a question for you. So in our office, we typically start with the fireplace design. We're looking at the proportion of the room to figure out what
Sure.
opening size we want.
Right.
Then we go to the charts, we figure out the size of the flue that based on the area. But there's always debate about whether the sides of the firebox should be angled, if the back should be angled, how
Mm.
much of a smoke shelf. We've got all these different opinions in our
Mhm.
office, and it's kind of an
Mhm.
eternal debate.
Mhm.
And it seems like when they're built, masons will do their own thing anyway. So a lot of the times what we draw doesn't end up being built. But from an expert, what would you, if there is sort of a general recommendation?
You're talking about the personal, the style, the fireplace. My job is to take your drawings in plan and elevation and support, that design and your design intent, right? Really don't have a preference on, how the sidewalls, are splayed, or if it's a 5-sided or, 3-sided firebox, or if it's more contemporary and straight sidewalls, flat back. That's all, that's usually decided by, you or the entire interior designer, for me. I
you
rarely
are
get to
you
shape.
are this is from the Foster Lyons playbook here. It's say yes. Just
Yeah,
whatever you want, I can make it work.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. After they listen to the podcast, we can tell them what they're
Well,
really
so
going to have to do.
if you had the option to have a fireplace that's a traditional depth or a Rumford depth, would you,
Yes.
and either one would work and no one has a strong opinion, would you recommend one over the other?
So the Rumford design is, popular in the Northeast. I'm sure you've heard the stories, about Count Benjamin Rumford. He lined, deep, cold fireplaces to make them more shallow, close down the throat, and repel more heat back into the room, and keep people warm, through the winter. They smoked terribly, but they captured the heat better. The Rumfords, per the code, can be really shallow. So if you're struggling for depth, in your wall, you pressed up against, some concrete or something, then, that can be your friend. You have to enjoy the squareness, look, of the Rumford and maintain those 45-degree sidewalls, to maintain that shape, to get that 12-inch depth minimum. But more traditional fireplaces work better. We don't have to create a fire so close to the opening and risk, the smoke, coming out and, onto the antique mantle, or heaven help you, the recessed television, above, or a piece of artwork, oh my gosh. Some of these pieces of art, are more than the whole building, sometimes, so, and they want to build a big wood burning fire, and put a Picasso right above, no pressure on me, so, then I become, more stringent on makeup air, and I make, the fireplace deeper, it's got to be a minimum of 20 inches, per code. And you can make the fireplace a little deeper if you can, it all depends on the look. I personally don't have a preference, because I see it all. We did an 18-foot wide fireplace in Florida a bunch of years ago, and
Did you just say 18 feet?
yeah. Oh, the craziness, the
That's
call.
a wall of fire.
So had an interior designer. She calls and she says, "Hey, I have a wall that I want a 12-foot wide fireplace on, or 12-foot long fireplace, and then the wall comes out at a 45, and then back, with the wall again, and each of those legs have like 4 feet on them, and it's going to be one big fireplace. Can you do that?" And I said, yeah, we can do that. And then I hung up the phone. I asked my business partner, "How the hell are we going to do that?" Well, we figured it out, and so, to answer your question, Molly, I don't, I like the contemporary, ones, and I like the traditional, fireplaces, the antique mantles, that are 500 years old. They're pretty cool to work with.
So let me get this straight. You're telling the architect, do whatever
Anything
you,
goes. This is
yeah,
exactly
whatever,
what I want to hear.
whatever you think looks good, do that. Like, oh
I
my
can vent it.
God.
Yep. That's the
Holy
whole point.
smokes.
That's the whole point
You're
of the
hired.
business, right? So we make the smoke go up the chimney, even if it's huge or small,
So wait, what the heck can you say what they were using this 18-foot fire wall for? Like human sacrifice? What was going on?
So they hired a famous metal artist, metal artist out of Brooklyn, Elena Colombo. And her specialty are welded metal art in fire bowls outside. So she works a lot with stainless and corten, and makes these creations of fire and flame. And she had a client that loved her artwork, but they wanted it on the inside of the house. And so artists like her will come to us and hire us to build a fireplace, that encases this 18-foot long metal piece of art, and we'll design the burners to come up, so the flames come up through the metal, and the whole thing can be, taken out for cleaning, and, we make sure the smoke goes up. So, there was no human sacrifice that I remember, but it was something. It was very Miami, very flashy, chrome that surrounded the entire opening.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now that you've given Molly like free reign to do, whatever aesthetic design she wants, and she comes back and says, "That's great. And by the way, I want it to be 3-sided or 2-sided, or any number bigger than 1."
Yep.
Then just tell her, no. That's not. I didn't mean that far. Or
No. There's peninsula fireplaces and see-through, dual-sided fireplaces.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I love that. I think
I'm
that is
not
so
crazy.
cool.
That's like exponentially more difficult for you, correct?
You get some you have to be a little more strategic because you have multiple sides now, which means more air, even though the BTUs may be the same. This is for like an open corner fireplace, right?
Right.
But then yeah, then you have to worry about, vacation homes that they open up the side of the house and all the breeze, is coming through, and with the fireplace on, and the breeze will go right through your fireplace,
Yeah.
so it's as much education for, the clients, in the end, is what's possible. If it's 40 wind gusts of 40 outside and you have the house open, the fireplace probably isn't going to work very well, so, you know, there's a lot of that.
And and what about like so the energy code, is a whole big deal these days
Mm-hmm.
for fireplaces, ignoring like if you're really worried about energy, you probably wouldn't put a fireplace in your house, but let's just skip over that at the
Right.
moment.
Right.
So, nobody can get a certificate of occupancy without
Yeah.
putting glass doors on the fireplace, and nobody can then operate their fireplace with glass doors between the firebox and the makeup air. Are you like everybody else? You're like, yeah. Well, after you get the CFO, pull those things off, or
Oh, a lot of clients do that. Yeah, for sure. But if we found that, if we have a motorized damper, up into the chimney, that if it has gas, it has to be gapped. So the gas, can
yep,
have somewhere to leak. If it's wood, then it's a different deal, and we can have a tight fitting damper
right.
in Flue. And when they come in and pump the house full of air and measure the pressure loss, they don't have to have glass doors.
Ah, you're doing it that way.
And in fact, we found that we don't even have to gasket these dampers anymore. The standard damper with a eighth or a quarter inch, 3/16 gap, around on the inside of the flue is pretty much enough to minimize the air loss.
Huh.
And a lot of times we don't even have to put glass doors on.
We
You have to
have
use glass
had difficulty with some of that in relationship to the HERS rating that a lot of places are requiring now. The house has to be so tight, and if you have a lot of fireplaces in there and they aren't sealed off in some way, it can really dock your score. And there's areas that are requiring very low HERS ratings now. So that's always a consideration that we have to face at the end of when it's actually tested.
There's a lot of fireplace companies that have a garage full of old doors that, are taken off after they get their CO, so, yep. We can, take an energy, conscious approach, to fireplace design, but it's different if you have an open masonry fireplace with a Picasso sitting above, the mantle. And, I'm going to push as much air as I can, out of the room and up the flue to protect, that painting in my hide. So, if a client comes in and they're real green and, they want efficiencies, then, that's one of the early questions. And you have to design the fireplace, with that in mind.
Yeah, don't worry. When they sell the Picasso, they're going to buy a lot of carbon credits, so don't worry about it.
You can also, that becomes a question of what else is going on in the rest of the house as well. So if you're going to kind of tolerate a certain amount of inefficiency from a fireplace, can you make up the difference other places? And a lot of the times you can, but now you have to, there are trade-offs, right? So now you need to pay a lot more attention to your whatever you're using as your air barrier and the rest of the enclosure and how well detailed that is. And maybe you don't want a vented attic anymore. Maybe there's other things that you can do to still meet your blower door test at the end of the job if that's a requirement.
Just depends on what's important to you as the client.
Well, Dane, I'm guessing most of the audience that's going to listen to this podcast whenever it gets published, is architects. So this is your opportunity to talk directly to a whole, like, thousands and upon thousands of architect listeners.
Definitely millions, Foster. I don't know what you're
Millions.
talking about.
Potentially
Millions.
even millions over, yes. Is there, what do if you had like whatever 5 or 2 things, like those upfront critical things, like, hey, you bunch of designers, just remember this when you start. Got a
Makeup
few of
error is a big
those?
one. You hit that one right away, which wasn't very surprising. Couple scientists.
Yeah.
So you understand that. So I was we got called into a big fireplace, big smoky fireplace in Reno a couple years ago. Big, huge house, and we walked in, and the whole place just smelled like smoke. And the client was she was an older lady, and I was trying to talk to her about makeup error, and how homes are built differently these days. And because she says, in my last 4 homes I never had a problem, and her brand new home was super tight. And I didn't get through to her on that message, and but you never get through to everybody, to convince them of the error. But makeup error is a big problem. We go out to homes that they have a fireplace in like a sunroom, and the sunroom is heated with in-floor heating, and you can feel the air is just stagnant, and they're having a problem. And because the fireplace has nothing to exhaust.
Yeah.
And then it becomes obvious to people after that. But that's one of the big ones. Find an operable window, find some sort of a way to get air to the fireplace. Other than that, to an architect, anything can be vented. So if you have a dream, we can vent it.
I can't believe it. You're just giving them, like, it's like all the chips. I mean, like, yeah, do whatever you want. We'll make it work for you.
You run into
What kind of a consultant are you?
we run into challenges like it was at a Comcast building in Philadelphia, and we got asked to participate in the client's his apartment level, and we got brought into the project really late, and he had 5 huge fireplaces in this huge apartment. And big fireplaces need big ducts, and they didn't at this point in the design, they didn't have any room for duct work going out to the side of the building. And I couldn't help them. They don't make a 15-foot wide vent free fireplace or anything that's worth looking at to spend that much money. And sometimes you can't help everybody. You can't help everybody all the time, right?
But it's nice to say yes. That's good. It's
Yeah.
it's fun to do that. I spent a lot of time in forensics, and so I was telling a lot of people a lot of things they didn't want to hear. I was an unpleasant fact specialist.
All right.
But now I get to tell people a lot of yeses, like, yeah, we can. Don't worry, I got your back on this one. Sky's the limit. Just do it early, right? Do it now.
Right. Yeah. That's the delivery of the bad news. It's hard sometimes.
Yeah.
You're a bad guy.
Do you often get involved with like older row houses that are getting renovated? And it could be any city, but since I'm close to New York, I'm going to say like
Sure.
a typical New York brownstone, where they want to reuse an existing fireplace.
Yes.
And those old flues are, it's just a couple of bricks. They made a little opening.
There's some flue tiles from 1920.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, right.
If you're lucky.
And those buildings, do a lot of work in New York, and those buildings are just fighting for air. And for some reason, the mechanical engineers, fight with me more than any other region, of the country. I don't know why. I don't know why that is.
when you say fight, what are they saying?
They're stingy with their makeup air.
Got it.
There's limited space on the roof where they can put equipment, right? Everybody's fighting for every square inch, and I usually lose, those ones. But yeah, lots of renovations happening all the time in New York, and these old, turn of the century flues.
Have you totally beside the point, but have you found anything interesting in these fireplaces?
I haven't. Most of these jobs, they hold up the front brickwork and demo the entire building behind it. It's
so
been
no like bars of gold.
No bodies, no bones.
Yeah.
We did find a wood. This one flue was all brick going up through this 100-year-old home, and the brick. You could tell the mason was corbelling the brickwork using pieces of wood shims, and you could tell like over time the wood shims had lit on fire. So there was evidence of many chimney fires, over the hundreds of years. It's surprising that this thing, never burnt to the ground, because I'm sure there's wood shims going all over, this interior, of this masonry.
What about chimney maintenance and fireplace maintenance? Like, what is the recommendation that you leave the client with, and how to make sure that they have longevity?
So if it's a vacation home and they're gas systems, and so they're rarely used, and they only build up soot, then cleaning usually isn't an issue. It's the wood burners that build up creosote. It's when clients have multiple homes and multiple fireplaces, they don't often have buildups, like restaurants, or hotel lobby, fireplaces do. And maintenance is really key. If it's a gas system, gas like that, is orange flames. It's orange flame is incomplete combustion. Clean flame is blue. And so that thing's sitting there putting off, soot, and it's collecting, and the soot collects in places where the ignition happens, and then the ignition stops. So that's the first thing you get you have to deal with for maintenance on fireplaces, is usually ignition systems, for fireplaces. And then, cleaning of flues is an annual thing, or it's a, every few year thing, depending on the use of the fireplace in the home.
Do you find one area of the country loves fireplaces more than others, or is it kind of an American universal that we just, whatever reason, it's in our, our background, we love them?
Yeah, the Northeast. We do more fireplaces in the Northeast than anywhere. And cities have trends. Like we'll do a couple Florida fireplaces, for a few years, and then Aspen, Aspen's coming back,
So Aspen went away for a little while because they passed do you know about, so I only know a little bit about this. My brother has a place there, and they passed some sort of law banning banning new wood burning fireplaces. So then this became this huge premium. So what Molly's nodding too, because
we've done projects in Colorado, and there's the whole process of getting permission, and there's a limited number, exactly like you described.
There's a fireplace quota.
Yeah, no more wood burning. We've seen homes that were demoed, everything but the fireplace, and the fireplace is sitting in the middle of this job site on stilts.
So they can grandfather it in.
Yeah, exactly.
That is funny.
Yeah, they don't burn wood in Pitkin County, anymore. We're designing some
unless they already had permission. I don't know. I know that they do it at the Little Nell Hotel. They've got a giant double-sided fireplace, and it's beautiful. It's a very pleasant place to be, but it's not anymore. Not any new. You can't recreate that. The new hotel, the upstarts, can't.
Right. Depends on how much money you have too. Yeah. But it, we have an Aspen project right now, and there's 2 open masonry fireplaces in it. So I don't know the history of the building,
Ah,
if they, grandfathered something in, or if, you know, if, they got permission, some other way. I don't know if it's new.
bribery.
It's not, I think they bought the property and they demoed the house, but maybe it's not a full demo. Maybe it's, partial.
They
But
might have
they're
changed it
pouring,
too.
yeah, they're pouring in this particular project, like a big column of concrete going up through the house. It's all poured concrete, like the face of the fireplace, so they're not retaining any bit of if something did exist there, except for the ghost of it, if there was one. So that's a good question. On that particular project, they're fairly far along in the design. They're pushing dirt around on the job site, and now they brought us in. The mechanical's already done, and we're routing flues up through this tight, concrete poured, mechanical shaft really. And I don't know the history of it, but yep. So we have fireplaces in California also. Washington State is really restrictive. The Bay Area, of California is super restrictive. San Francisco and just north of there, the Reno area. You have to have a fireplace. It has to be on some emission tested list. By the
Really?
EPA.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's really restrictive. Massachusetts, you can't have any gas in Massachusetts.
Can't have gas. Can't have a natural gas fireplace. You can't have that.
You can, as long as it's a listed product that you pick from a list.
So you can't put a natural gas, like you can't have like a log.
Can't have a log ladder. No.
Huh.
Wow.
Yep. Oh, I say can't, but we've had homes in our past that really wanted them really bad, and so, they're willing to throw lots of money, at having, what they want.
Yep.
It's always an approach in society. But in general, yeah, they're real restrictive, for gas. They can't. We did a Martha's Vineyard home that had had a bunch of fireplaces in the house, and it had a pool house that was also a cooking fireplace, and they didn't want any kind of off-the-shelf gas, barbecue, and so we made them a custom grill that raises and lowers with a handle.
Of course.
I can't remember the name of it. It's a certain style, like a South American style.
I think Unobtainium, I think, is what that company's called.
But we gave him a grill that was a wood burner that you had to start, the fire yourself. So
Oh, okay.
real restrictive. But
Wow.
Manhattan is very different, from Long Island. Long Island's kind of the Wild West, and a lot more things fly that definitely don't in the city.
No, we got a few more things can burn down in the city. That's,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we should probably wrap this up. I don't want to take up everybody's entire evening. Anybody got any last questions or last words? Molly, you usually have the last word.
I already got it. I can do what I want. That was
Yeah,
That's right.
I know.
That's right.
It's unbelievable. If you, that's so cool.
You'll have to help me foster work on my consulting, approach. Apparently, I'm a little too easy.
They're gonna walk all over you. Come on.
Yeah, I know. I give away the farm so much.
That old thing, like give them 3 positives before you say anything negative. It's the other way around. So you got to give them 3 no's before you.
All right.
I actually agree with your approach. I always sort of view it as like the expert's job to figure out how to give the designers what they're hoping for, and only if it absolutely can't be done do you finally have to tell them, sorry, I'm incapable of achieving your dream.
Well, we're all problem solvers, right? And that's part of the fun, is to solve the problem. And the more challenge, the funner it can be.
Yeah, I agree.
Everybody enjoys a nice job site with nice team players, a nice architect, and a contractor that's pleasant to work with. Everybody's been on the other side of that coin, and
Yeah,
so
yeah. Well, does that happen once in a while? Hey.
every now and then.
All right, Christy, anything?
But that's the fun, is working with the team and working through a challenge.
That's my
Yeah.
that's my last comment. Just say yes.
Just say yes.
Yeah.
Shit.
The only caveat is the asterisk I always have is like, you can always say no later. So anyway, thank you, everybody. I think we should probably just all go through those instructions that I sent out just in case. But this, not unless you want to come back next week,
Follow
Dane, and
through.
listen to whatever we're doing next week. Hopefully Molly and Christy, we don't have to go through the whole recording thing again next week.
That's great. That's so much easier.
I know, just knock 10 minutes off everybody's life. Added 10 minutes to it.
There you
So,
go.
all right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Thank you.
Dane. Thank
Thanks
you,
so
Molly.
much,
Thank you,
Dane.
Christy.
It was nice
Nice
meeting
to
all of you.
meet you.
Yeah.
Have a good
Great.
night.
Have a
Okay.
good night, guys.
Talk to you
Bye.
soon. Bye-bye.
How do I end this? Boom.